Kia ora koutou, everyone. Apologies from Bernie, who's going to be a little bit late. He will be here, briefly held up. So welcome to everyone, including Alan, members of the public, and also welcome to Dan and the team, and in your hand. We are in your hands. Sorry, could we please start with the karakia? Kia mā, kia 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 tū, kia māta, tai, iki ati.
Kia ora, and thank you for making the effort to come along on a Tuesday, which is an unusual day for us, so good to see the table is full. Today we have the final workshop before the council meeting on the 5th of August, where you have a decision to make. And so the focus of this workshop today is around an update on where we're at in the next 11 days. To make note, in 8 days it's your council meeting on the 5th of August, and in 11 days, depending on your decision, is the date to put in a proposal for the Head Start. We're also in this workshop, we'll look to identify the key principles regarding representation. We have heard from you already around what representation may look like to some of you, and we have put that within this presentation to come back to you with that. Also looking to provide an update on the options that will be highlighted in the council report, which will be released looking like Thursday this week. And we're also looking to address any questions you may have, and then also understand if there are any models as a table where you have less interest, so we can have a greater focus on those other models. So we're in the know and do phase, so we're sharing information with you, but we're also requesting direction from you during this session today. In terms of a bit of a status update where we are, it's been a bit of a whirlwind 3 months where we have provided lots of different information. We have had a number of workshops. When I was writing the council report around the background, I think we're sitting at about 10 so far, so lots of time to digest, ask questions, and provide us direction around where as a table you're sitting. So we have provided information, the Head Start proposal, the Head Start report, which Morris and Lowe have assisted us with, a Horizons report, but also a Wellington Region report. There has been community feedback. Community feedback was extensive, more feedback than we would usually receive through a conversation piece. We've had iwi and stakeholder feedback as well, including some other organisations who have shared feedback with us. There has been council and officer regional engagement throughout this process, and we now look towards the next steps, which are releasing a council report where there will be a number of options. We will talk through those today, but a number of options identified in the report for the table to consider in that meeting. Sorry, before we move on, and apologies to put you on the spot there, Bernie, I wondered if this was a point in time, I tried to catch you earlier, but a point in time in which you wanted to give a bit of a status update or where you're at.
Sure. Yeah, sorry, I've been in another Head Start backstop meeting with some mayors this morning already to try and understand where everyone is at, and it's was an interesting discussion this morning where there is more and more appetite from colleagues around the Horizons region not to support a Head Start proposal, that they are recommending to their councils almost that they don't participate in the Head Start, that they go into the backstop part of the amalgamation issue. And Palmy and us are probably the only two that have a greater appetite to be able to or want to maybe be part of the Head Start proposal. There is some, I think there's a little bit of fear or uncertainty in those councils, especially the smaller ones, that they feel that they will lose their identity by being in a Head Start proposal, and that their communities aren't ready for that yet, that there is a lot more work to be done and detail to be decided before they do that. As I've said, Manawatu are clearly at the other end of the spectrum, where they have already decided that they're saying no to Head Start, no to amalgamation, full stop, and the others have leaned now towards going to the backstop process. I don't know anything further than what I emailed everyone last night. Probably would be, I hope, reasonably clear in terms of what the situation is south. I'm going to, or be part of a briefing at Kapiti later on today, mainly to, so I suppose, sort of talk to them around the risks that they might have if they don't decide which way they want to go. If they, as indicated, don't want to join Wellington, yet they don't want to either come north, then they could be putting themselves at some risk of being told where to go, and that's probably needs to have some emphasis to them that, you know, that they are being at risk. I mean, even though the councils in the Horizon region who say they don't want to be part of Head Start are conscious of the fact that this is a government directive and they want to be seen to be playing the game as well, that they don't want to, other than Manawatu, are pretty much willing and open to further conversations. There has been some talk of the region still acting together, but you know, we've got this wide variation in terms of who wants to be in and who wants to be out. So yesterday we did have a meeting, Grant, Janet, myself, with Monique and Wade. Darren from Kapiti wasn't there, but Kapiti are still, playing their hand cards very close to their chest at the moment and not saying anything. Interestingly enough, Palmy's view was that some of their community were quite happy to look south, even further than us. Further, rather than going west to Wanganui, which was an interesting sort of position as well. So, look, no one's predetermining anything at this stage. They're all sort of saying, there's a number of options that they're taking to their council table. Some are predicting unanimous, some are predicting it being very tight. And there's, the more conversations we have, it's come slightly clearer every time. But, look, today and between today and next Wednesday, obviously, even further conversations will be had before we get to a final decision. Hope that's clear as mud.
Thank you, Bernie.
Morning, everyone. So we're here to help you through this workshop. There's a lot of information that you've all received. The good news is we're not giving you any new stuff today. I think we've reached the point where you've had all the information that you can possibly work through. It is interesting to us that the timeline that was announced back when Head Start kicked off had some very concrete deadlines. Our reflection recently is that some of those have become a little less concrete, and perhaps the whole process is a little more fluid and more open than we were led to believe. And it's probably a reaction by the government to the council's reactions to this whole process. That they're not going to get the neat answers that are exactly in line with what the government set out for. So they have indicated through some of their officials that there's probably other opportunities to continue to participate, or there's things that are less than quite the Head Start as well. So some of what we're going to talk about today reflects that. Just a question right at the outset that's kind of relevant to that, which is one of the positive features of the Head Start process when it was first announced was that there was a signal of relief, statutory relief from long-term plans and representation reviews if you went through the Head Start process. I'm presuming that that's still a feature, but that's premised on you being accepted as a Head Start pathway, and then so these where there are other councils or council groupings that have done sort of soft Head Start proposals, or I think others have called them Head Start pathways, or different, like this kind of like we're kind of not ready, but we're indicating that we could be open. Is that likely to meet the threshold of the statutory relief, or is it quite clear about when statutory relief will be offered?
I think at best we can all just give you an opinion on that, Sam. Within the proposals, if you do a proposal for Head Start, there is a section called deliverability that actually, when you read into it, there's actually your list of the things your group or your councils need in order to be successful in implementing it. And that's where you put all of those things. So if you're not putting a proposal, you don't have the same opportunity to get something ticked off like that.
What I'd, in addition to that, in kind of picking up Dan's earlier comments about fixed timeframes are becoming a little bit less fixed, what I'd comment on is, that hybrid option, I think certainly doesn't offer a statutory relief pathway. But one of the things I think councils who are participating in Head Start or wanting to participate in Head Start might want to reflect on is that while Cabinet will make some decisions in September, October, we then have an election, and what we know is that actual decisions won't be made until May next year, by which stage councils have done the long-term plan and will have had to have their long-term plan audited. And councils will have also had to very much progress their representation reviews. So I'm not sure that statutory relief is even a real thing to Head Start councils in the way that maybe we initially interpreted. And I think it's a really good example of the sequencing of all of these reform programs and how it comes together in a practical council environment, which is often not how those advising ministers see it because they don't operate in a council environment.
So there is a structure to today, but it is this is your workshop intended to help you with the decision you have to make next week. So if you have questions that don't fit the structure of it, or something comes to your mind, please just ask it, because that way we can work our way through. So the intent today is you do have a number of options on your table. And ideally, you might give some direction to your officers that some of those options are not quite as highly favoured as others, so that they can narrow down their report for you next week and simplify things. We've structured this workshop so that part of it happens towards the end. And so we're actually talking about the other things first, but if it doesn't work out that way and you naturally want to jump into that part of it, that's fine. We can work with that. But there are some other really important things that have come up through your questions, through your discussions, that actually are about, well, if we did do something with one of these options, then these are the important things to us. And it's around representation, and it's around the services, and what would be local, what would be regional, or how would we structure ourselves to adequately represent the people we represent now in a bigger council. What kind of governance arrangements do we need to be satisfied to be able to move forward? So we can have that conversation without actually knowing what it is we're going to partner with, because it's about what's important to Horowhenua and what's important to this table when you talk to the partners that you might talk to. So we'd like to talk about some of that so that it actually arms your organisation to be able to continue those conversations. Because if you do something If you do a proposal, then that needs to go into a proposal. If it's not a proposal, but it's something less than that, then actually your ongoing conversations need to centre on those things because they're what matters. It's also important when we're having that conversation to think about what do you need to settle on now. What would you settle on by the time you get to, let's call it, a final proposal in March next year? And then actually, what would you not finalise until you are implementing your organisation at whatever point? Not everything has to be, you don't have to get to the point of saying, well, we're going to have this many boards and they're going to have this many people in them, or we're going to have this many local boards and they're going to look like this. You don't have to get to that level of detail now. And then this is the opportunity for you to ask questions of us and your officers about any of these reports that you've received or any other things you've seen and heard that you would like to have answered, so that you can understand it before next week's council meeting. So Morrison Law Advisory have looked at 6 options for you. So these are all in the report. They're all in the volumes of materials you've had. There is also a Wellington one. But we've looked at various options around horizons or subsets of horizons for you, and also including Kapiti. There was a 6th one added in reasonably late in the piece, which was just Horowhenua and Palmerston North. So that would have been new to you from the last report you got from us. There's obviously a lot of similarities between the previous options that were considered, but it does separate it out. Alongside that, you've also had the Wellington regional work. Can you talk to that one?
So alongside that, there has been the Wellington region work, which will also, you'll see come through in your council paper, so including the options that Dan just spoke about. Within this space, initially we were an observer, and then we moved to being included within one of the models within their proposals. So this option will also be identified and included within the council paper. Another option which will be included is the Horizons Region MOU. Noting those options prior that we spoke about are Head Start proposals. This option here around a Horizons Region MOU is more so a backstop process. MDC have adopted and signed this. This is a document where they are looking to have a collaborative framework across the 8 Manawatu Wanganui councils to jointly explore what it might look like going forward. So it is not going into a Head Start proposal, it is looking at how we may work collaboratively going forward.
The comment I'd make about this option, and Mayor Burney kind of alluded to it in his update around acknowledging that kind of have 8 councils in the region that are in different spaces about where they see their leadership role around reform. I think one of the things that I'd encourage you all to reflect on is the work that you've done over the last few months, where you've actually teased out these options. You've done the work to be clear on principles, what matters, and to do the modelling around the different iterations. Not all councils have adopted the process that this council has adopted, where you've gone out for community consultation, you've done some in-depth financial modelling, or had the benefit of participating in a number of processes. The government would probably see this as the CTB process, which is the backstop process. It just happens to put a framework around it. And this will be an option that, unless you give us guidance otherwise, we will be putting in the options analysis report for next Wednesday for council to actively consider, so that you can see the draft MOU, see what I understand in particular Manawatu, Wanganui and Ruapehu are likely to sign up to, but I haven't got a sense of where the other councils are landing.
Does that reflect that if we do nothing, that come November 2028, that the delivery of regional council functions is like what happens. Like that's what I understood was that if we do nothing, then like we kind of need this because we're kind of preparing for that end date, aren't we?
No regional council laws. Yeah. So the organisations and the functions still exist, but there is no elected members of it. So you get the CTB. Yes. Given a period of time, if you go right back to the original simplified local government, that structure would have a period of time to develop the solution for the region, which is effectively what's being proposed here.
And I think just noting that.
Oh no, hey look, I wasn't going to add any value here. I was just going to sort of comment. For me, like the MOU sort of looks like you've got a foot in each camp. Manawatu especially have been pretty vocal on where they lie and where they sit. So it's hard to take this too seriously from my personal point of view, given that it's as if this is sort of it is a backstop process for them. If they need it, they'll use it. We'll sign it up, make us feel good.
I think that's absolutely right, Paul. I think Manawatu know that they're in a no-lose situation. They can dig their toes in, but where they get put will be fine because they're good neighbours.
The only point that I was going to add to that is this is a model that has been analysed by Morrison Lowe, and there were benefits, but there were also some disadvantages, specifically in that community of interest when we're looking across to Wanganui and Ruapehu. So it is something to consider, and if you were wanting to look more around what that model looked like, you can see that within the Morrison Lowe report. The other.
I was just going to say, I mean, that's something that's been weighing on my mind, is that we've had all this fantastic information and nothing is clear in terms of this would work really well for our region. It works in some ways for some things, and it doesn't work well in other ways for other things. So the thoughts for me at the moment are, well, if we're looking at that local representation, and that's something that our community is really concerned about, having a look at those smaller amalgamations works better for that local voice, whereas the bigger works better economically. But then also potentially you could be looking at, can we not say, let's do something completely different in the terms of, can we take transport out of the equation for amalgamation and put it into something completely different that works across the regions, because it is a big it is a big question, and something that not each region should be responsible for. It should be something that's amalgamated in a greater, bigger sense. So that's where I'm really stuck.
I would also say that this MOU and the process it sets out sort of, in a way, rejects the idea of a Horizons unitary authority, because that's inherent in here, that actually that's not what is the best thing for the region. So it kind of presupposes a different outcome as a solution, and a number of the councils within that group are looking more at a federation model or something like that. So they are not, the outcome of this is not a Horizons unitary. The outcome of this is something else, otherwise it would be saying we think the Horizons unitary is a good approach.
Mm-hmm. Sorry, just to add to that, the complication is when you're listening to some of the ministers speaking, they are very much talking in regional terms. They seem to be giving very clear messages of, we see Wellington up to potentially Levin as one region, and then we'll see that boundary is another region. So that's also, something to think about. Where are they headed? And they're sort of waving their flags around and showing a little bit of and you hear Minister Bishop in particular talk about like the driver behind Head Start and Backstop is to give effect to the new Resource Management Act system. And when you look at the data and modelling, which tells you that this is not about efficiencies. Like, yes, there's an efficiency piece in there, but this isn't about saving a whole lot of money for the ratepayer. This doesn't solve the affordability crisis, but it gives effect to some of those drivers around economic growth, land use planning, making of place. Then you can kind of see why in that Morrison Lowe report, the Kapiti Horowhenua Pāmi, let's call it the growth corridor into the central North Island, comes up as a high profile option. Councillor, it's like you maybe have seen the last slide, one of the last slides here, because I think Dan later on tries to make the point, like, whatever option, there's nothing perfect. There's these trade-offs as you've just described.
The other option, which you would have received an email from Mayor Burney last night around, which is the Palmerston North and HDC front foot. This is an option where a proposal to put forward a partnership with Palmerston North, but being open to partners. So this is signalling to government that we are open to this and we are open to other parties joining the partnership. And so this option will also be provided within the paper.
Yeah, so this is kind of that hybrid option that we've been talking about for a while. At the moment, it only names Horowhenua and Palmerston North because, based on what we understand and know, it aligns with the modelling, but we know that Palmerston North are open to this option. Obviously, Mayor Burney is attending the Kapiti workshop today, where we'll get a little bit of a further feel for whether they are open to this option. That majority of the other neighbours aren't open to a hybrid front foot option. They would rather wait for backstop.
Okay, I'd like to go right back to the beginning, when before all of these 6 options plus 2 sub-options turned up for you, you crystallised what was really important, that actually out of going forward you wanted something that would enable growth, because that's, that is a core driver for this organisation and its community at the moment. You were worried about affordability, you wanted to understand impacts on services, and you were looking for something that would retain local voice and identity. So I think it's really important that as you think about it and as you work through what should we do, that you do anchor your decision and the things that you said were important before these turned up, which I know is easier to say than do, but they remain a good foundation. The other thing that's important is the Head Start assessment criteria, which again we have used in our reports to try and highlight options that meet it. And in a very simple way, the bigger the amalgamation, the more it looks regional, then it satisfies the first couple of criteria. It starts to get challenged by maintaining local voice, and deliverability can get more difficult depending on the size and scale of it. Your options also have some that cross the boundary towards the south to bring Kapiti in, which currently would mean that council would be part of 2 planning regions, because it would be covering the Wellington region and also the Horizons region. We would assume that inherent in any proposal that might include those councils or another one, that you would ask for that to become part of 1 planning region rather than being both. Just it would make sense. When asked about that, the officials have said that the intention is not to change regional planning boundaries, but if the amalgamation proposed makes sense, then that would make sense to move it out of a planning boundary. If you can satisfy the rest of the criteria in the government's mind, then there's no reason why they wouldn't support that. through the the Q&A session we had a couple of weeks ago, as well as the questions that you have put through to your officers, there is a theme around the questions that you've been putting forward, largely around democracy and representation and governance. Those are the core concerns you have with any change. And how does your community stay represented? How do the communities of interest you represent stay relevant? How do you fit in a council that might become 10 times bigger than you currently are now, or where there's a huge geographic area, or where there's a large urban area that you're part of? Those are all understandable concerns. My question to you, now that you've got all this information on your table and you're starting to think about it, are there any other things that you need to know, or you have questions about, or the reports, or any of them that actually there's a question you need to know to have a proper discussion with your colleagues, or to make an ultimate decision?
Rates and what we pay for. So one thing we haven't really talked about is that if we go with a larger amalgamation, my concern is that how do we make it fair so that the people living in this area aren't paying for something that those will benefit from in another area, and that what they need, because it might be a smaller place, they'll be at the bottom of the list rather than the top. And is there a conversation there for looking at how rates then will be paid? Can we change that? Can we advise government to say, well, if you've got this large area, can we change who pays for what so that it becomes a little bit more balanced? Is that something that we can look at so we can ensure that our rates aren't going up, but our services are staying at a smaller level? And we need to then, if we're in those, say, sub-unitary models, whatever it will be, that we can say, well, actually, we need this done here, please, and we need that done, and that's actually going to get done.
Very fair concerns and questions about the mergers, and unfortunately, the simple answer and the truthful answer to you is you can't actually control what happens once it takes place. You, as a table, can voice your preference now and set whatever constraints you would like to see, but ultimately the next elected group of councillors will make decisions about how rates are charged. They will have the same tools available you have now, which is, you can have targeted rates for services, you can have fees and charges, you can have general rates as well. So you could, as part of a proposal or something, come together with the council or councils or your partners within, set some form of direction and control, but ultimately you have to accept that belongs to the next governance table.
Thank you. A very complex report. I had this lovely wishful thinking that it would just have this one option that says, pick me, I'm the best, it's going to be nice and easy. And there's massive trade-offs on every one of the options, but we've had clear direction on local representation. But what I saw in the Greater Wellington report, which gave pause for concern, was because they've been working on it much longer time, was around transition costs and things like that, which seemed excessive. So that's my caution, if anything, there on the costs. The bigger, the more councils we combine with, will there be need to look at consideration of, will transition costs blow out more? Because we already know there's no savings really from the point of view. Clearly demonstrates Horowhenua is on the lower operating costs against some of the other councils. So yeah, I'm looking at page 6, and I think we have to start to look at those trade-offs and look at the greens and the yellows as opposed to the reds. Would be where I'm looking at.
The transition cost is the technology that I'm using. More council yeah. Sorry. Yeah, and the way that these transition costs have been calculated, they're a percentage. So you add more councils, it's going to go up. It is it's a fair way to do something quite quickly, but it doesn't actually take into account what might already exist in a group of councils and the extent to which they already work together, or the extent to which their systems already align. Yeah, I mean, they are substantial costs. I mean, one of the things I took out of that report is on page 35, there appears to be more benefits to your community from a merger of just Kapiti and Horowhenua than there appears to be from the whole of the Wellington one. You know, there's some expense to it, but NPV is higher for your community.
I wondered if I might just put some, I guess, lived experience into this. And so from the Auckland amalgamation, of which Waikato, where I worked, was part of, there are high transition costs at the outset, but you've also got more efficiencies, but they're a tail end efficiency, and the work that's been done to date is not at that level of detail. And so that is like a next step. But you can imagine that you need to retain staff to make sure you get through the amalgamation process and you don't lose IP as you're going through that. So there's a high level of uplift in costs initially, but you would hope to see that tail off. When you look at timeframes, most council amalgamations, even on the Three Waters side of things that I've seen, the first 10 years, what you're really trying to do is aim to keep the rates around about similar for the communities of interest that you have now, and beyond that you would start to see the savings come in, because it takes time to get that planning together, to get your efficiencies through, making sure you're putting the right infrastructure in at the right places. All of that kind of thing takes time to actually embed. So you are looking at, if not more costs initially, you're looking at similar types of rating mechanisms for probably about 10 years before you start to see the real added value. So unless there's something that comes along and sideswipes us, such as rates capping. So
Sorry, Dan, I just wanted to make a comment about what Katrina said about rates. It's interesting that the data produced by Horizons shows that Palmerston North City have been subsidising the rest of the region quite significantly in Horizons functions, and also that the money that we have given to Horizons has not necessarily been spent in the right area. So you can, make all the sort of plans and types of things, but that sort of scale does help others in the smaller regions. So, I mean, a lot of Palmerston North would be saying, well, why should we be subsidising smaller areas and paying rates for them to, spend? So it works both ways, type of thing. Then, and I did a bit of investigation on my son's council in Sydney, who were forced to amalgamate in 2015, 2016, and they even went as far as going to the Supreme Court of New South Wales to try and stop the amalgamation, but were forced in the end, even though 97.8% of the community said no, they were forced to do an amalgamation with a neighbouring council. And what you said around what Alison said about long-term benefits, the benefits of that merger didn't start happening for about, it's only now that where they are realising some of the efficiency gains that they've had in that, but recognise that without amalgamation their rates would have been a heck of a lot higher.
That comment about Palmerston North Horizons rates. So, if the smaller councils don't buy into amalgamation with Palmerston North, when the Horizons disappears, they're going to take a financial hit.
Short answer, yes. Yeah.
For you, Bernie. Make it easy on you. Someone else will have to pay for the services that are currently being funded, the regional council services that are being funded from Palmerston North ratepayers. Or the services will have to change to adjust to the envelope of money that is within that new regional council functional area basis. Yeah, which is a long way of saying yes.
Just it'll be really interesting as well to get some information from our iwi as well in terms of what they're thinking.
So we've sent out to elected members the letter that we got from Waipuku Tribal Authority in Rangatane, and in the council report we will make sure that in that iwi Māori engagement section we comment on their feedback. But Waipuku and Rangatane emphasising that northwards facing option. But what I've heard from all iwi partners is this notion that their areas are not defined by territorial authority boundaries and they're used to working across maps. And actually what's more important to them is the partnership role they will play in any transition.
Monique will probably remember this, but there was that press release from Simon Watts or Chris Bishop, I think it was last year, in the context of local water's done well, and at the end it had that statement about regional transport organisations. And have we had any other signals that in the absence of participating in Head Start or any amalgamation that there is still appetite, or that's still on the table, or that there's any work that's going into regional transport type arrangements?
Not the transport. What they've said is that and of regional council functions, unless they're the things that are already being talked about to be done regionally, they will progress. But nothing else would be nationalised than what's already being progressed. Any other general questions before we kind of move forward a little bit? I'm going to pass over to Jessie, who's been doing this part of the workshop with a few other councils. Oh, sorry, no, actually it's going to be Ash.
Okay. Now that we've worked out who's doing that. Okay, so representation. Dan's already mentioned some of the things that are really relevant here. Particularly, you need to think about this from your own perspective as a district rather than any of the other parties in the option currently, because you've noted in your principles that identity and local voice are of utmost importance to you. So we're only talking about this today in abstract at the high level rather than the details, but these are important. Obviously, there are a number of councils around the country who are looking at this. Some of them come from a different starting point in that they all might be rural provincial and they're coming together. Some of them might be all urban and they're coming together, and then some groupings are similar to most of the options that you have here, where there is a defined hub, and then some very different councils wanting to be dance card partners with the hub. And so it lends itself to those discussions around what is really of utmost importance to you, who are the communities that you're trying to protect, and what is unique about your district that might need to be preserved. Some of the other councils, and this is public information, so we're not obviously betraying any confidences here, are looking at things completely differently. So, for example, were the Wairarapa to put up a Wairarapa unitary model, they're looking at redrawing the awards around their catchments, because catchments are obviously key to the criteria here, and they also make sense in protecting their communities of interest. Obviously, they also have the benefit of the 2013 and 2017 amalgamation proposals that were put forward that ultimately failed. But within them, you can see that they have defined their communities of interest outside of the traditional district boundaries as they currently are, for good reason. They have a coastal community to protect. They sometimes have to deal with the urban areas feeling like they're the poorer cousins in a massive rural area. So lots to think about there. There are a number of different ways that you can do this in formal structures. We've obviously talked to you before about community boards and local boards. They're the ones that are bandied about most frequently. There are other ways of doing this also without having that second tier of governance structure. There is a plethora of deliberative democracy, committees, advisory boards, etc., community citizen assemblies, etc., that you can put in place as well. But obviously the boards are the more formal structures. And it comes down to what you want to protect. I think it would be fair to say that in any of these models you will have fewer councillors with an increased workload potentially with regional functions as well. So what does that mean in terms of councillor per population ratios? That's something that you'd need to consider. Some of the ones that we've been looking at have currently as low as about 800 people per councillor. And so those would be generally in areas where the land mass is large, and so representation is more important. That would be something that you'd have to think about if you went with Palmerston North, because the needs are quite different there. Any questions at this point before I move on to the next slide? No?
So we've got a series of slides here just to put some information to you to try and help your thinking to see if you can settle on some of these principles about what might be important if you were to go down a path of either a proposal or a front foot or something short of a backstop.
And so what we have done is pulled together some themes that have come out of feedback we've received from you over the past 3 months, but also the written feedback. So this is what we're hearing from you. So we're hearing maintaining local representation, decisions should be made at the appropriate level. You should still have delegated authority. There should be communities, should have accessibility, visibility to local leadership. So this is just a list of key themes or key items that have come out from across the table. When trying to put these into kind of 5 key themes from what we've heard so far, this is what comes up. What we're here today is to see is this where you're sitting? Feedback has been over the last 3 months. You may, from even what you've just heard from Jessie, it may slightly be different now, and so really keen to understand as we go through the rest of the workshop today, is this reflective or is this not? And is there something in here where you feel actually that may not meet the principles that we set at the start, and therefore potentially looking at it in a different approach. This is themed and put together from officers' base in terms of your feedback, but it may not necessarily align with where you are sitting as a table.
If I could just comment on why we think it matters that you get to a position next Wednesday about some representation principles, and as Ashley said, this is what you have said. We've just condensed it into some high-level principles, and I wanted to test it with you today before we finalise the council agenda. If council chooses to participate in Head Start, we need this information to actually complete a Head Start proposal. If you choose to go into Backstop, then this possibly doesn't matter because the government's going to drive their representation, like they will build representation principles. But if you are looking at that hybrid option,
around wanting to be in a position of strength with whoever, Palms North, Kapiti, to put something to the government that says we're not ready for Head Start, but we want to get a front foot on backstop. Here's some thinking we've done. Here's what's really important to us. This is about, I suppose, showcasing to government that you've done some thinking about what would matter in order to be in that driving seat around how you might design representation when a process is created. But it's obviously not getting into that level of detail that says, and we will have 7 community boards, and on those community boards will be 7 members who will represent this grid block in this catchment. So this is trying to keep it high level to help you, whether you're in Head Start or something else. And I suppose even if you are in backstop, that this is a reference point for those conversations later down the track.
Give you quickly through you, Nola. I'll give you a real world example about how important this is. In one of the areas we're working, the inability to agree one aspect of this is the reason why they cannot put forward a combined single unitary authority for a region in Head Start, because there is an underlying representation issue that actually can't be resolved in the timetable we've got. So their plan is to have a transitional approach that gives them a bit more time to get there and gives them time to solve what is a really difficult thing for those councils and communities.
I personally feel it is exactly what we got fed back by our community. My concerns and worries come from the amazing report in that there are trade-offs. There's no two ways about it. There are trade-offs. And I don't think I personally realise just how much some of those trade-offs would be. And so I think those are our highest priorities. And finding one or two other councils that will go with that agreement is probably our priority going forward. But yeah, there's concerns about the trade-offs we'd have to make in all of the options.
I guess for me, the only thing I would like to see in that is that the local representation actually has some legislative authority. So we're not just like a consultative body. We actually can make decisions, and we have the power to make those decisions.
Is it fair to say that regardless of what of this we put forward, that whether it's front foot, backstop, whatever, that the government can ultimately decide they're going to do what they want anyway?
Yes. Yes, but what I'd qualify it with is they have said to the country and the councils, here's a process, you can choose to be part of it, you tell us what the detail looks like. Provided you put forward a unitary council model, we will smooth the pathway to the creation of that. Simplify it. When they did the same thing with Three Waters, they said, here's what we would like as an outcome of Three Waters, you decide whether you're in or out, and the basis on which you make those decisions. They let councils choose largely whether they're in or out, and they let them live or die by the decisions they made, and they only intervened in one situation when there were probably a number of decisions made up and down the country with which they would not have agreed, but they said, that's the process, we offered you the opportunity, you've chosen to do that. So they've shown us once that they're prepared to let councils use the proposal put to them.
Was there any further feedback on those principles? Like, did it? Because one of the things, no matter what option you decide next Wednesday, part of officers' advice will be that good would look like you agreed to a set of principles. Now, it doesn't bind council to anything, but it's to help then articulate in whatever combined letter we might send to government that we can tell talk about the importance of this. And so just, we don't have to get it absolutely right, because that will obviously be a decision of council next week, but any feedback we get now will help us finalise the council report.
Yes, I'm not sure whether this is referring to massaging the principles as such, which I totally agree with, but it's about understanding what we mean by those principles, and I know that is a further piece of work, but I do want to flag it now that those principles for me mean an understanding of what sits where. In other words, when it comes to the big strategic decisions, whether it be around transport, the new planning regime or whatever, we understand that that sits at a different level, and that what we're talking, I should say I, at this stage, am talking about is about the parks, the reserves, the libraries, those things which our community, A, really connect with on a daily basis, and B, want to make sure that there is not a local voice, but acknowledging your point, Katrina, local empowerment, actual empowerment through some statutory body such as the local board regime rather than a community board. So I guess what I'm saying is they sit at a high level. Let's understand what we mean by those when we make our formal decisions at the council meeting, because we need to say to the government, actually, we know the rules of engagement, we understand that, and this is the area that we want to carve out when it comes to local empowerment. I hope that makes sense.
Makes so much sense that that's the discussion we'd like to have now.
I say so.
So you do have options, you know. In our report, we've presented a pretty traditional view of a unitary council. And I have just created some names here. There is nothing magic in those. They don't exist. And nobody's agreed that they exist, just so we're all clear. But as an example, do you believe that a layer of representation between the councils and the community is something as a council you want to support, or do you not support it? Because there are different options emerging around the country. Some of the new unitaries are saying, no, we don't need that. We don't want that. We'll do it through a ward-based system. Others are saying, no, it is critical to our success as a new unitary council. We've already had one view about, they should exist and they should actually have delegations more similar to a local board, or they should be a legislative structure. But you don't have to have that. That is an option. What's the views? What's the questions? Are they good or bad?
Having had experience of a community board with no delegations, I'm totally of the belief that it has to be a local board with local delegations, local budget. And I do think as we go further down this journey, there's a need for, I know there's a report nationwide floating around on one particular council that moved from wards to local things, not just Auckland. And I think we need to investigate that more to get a clearer understanding so we can compare them, because there's also things, people talk about a federation model, which I'd like more information on, those sorts of things. But definitely there needs to be something that has that local voice with local empowerment, as David said.
I think for me, I'd probably prefer the ward system, given that you've then got a voice in the local community. I'm not too fond of a whole lot of layers of governance, leadership, however you want to present it. And I think, that way you'd still have that voice at a local level within that community, but also would feed in directly into one entity as such.
Whatever we do, Dan, it's not obviously going to fit everybody's views and opinions on that, because, appointing community boards or with delegations and things and giving them a budget and everything is just adding another layer of democracy that doesn't exist at the moment. So rather than finding efficiencies, all of a sudden you're adding more layers of decision making that, in fact, I question as to their value, to be honest. And we see now examples. I mean, to be brutally honest, we're overrepresented here. You know, the fact that we have 13 people representing 30,000 people or 40,000 people seems to me far in excess of what I think should be a representation model. It's far too many for that number of people. And that's why, in some ways, I almost prefer a smaller unitary authority, say only 2 or 3 councils, because it then gives the opportunity to be able to share that governance structure reasonably easily. How you base it, whether it's 5, if there's 3 of us, 5 each, or if there's 2 of us, it's 6 each. I don't know, but it almost think it makes it a little easier if there's a smaller number of councils in an authority that you can easily share that thing. So no one has a particular voting power across the district, and I've said for a number of times we have this parochialism even in our own little district where the people of Shannon and the people of Foxton and the people of Manukau all fight for their little thing, and we're representing about 600 people at a time. I mean, to me it seems a thing. So if we can't get ourselves raise our level up a bit in terms of what our governance looks like with the strategic sort of level that we have to, I think, probably change our view in terms of the way that we govern, rather than worrying about the sandpit at Wairere Beach or other things like that. They can be done in other ways. So I'm a bit reluctant to start adding extra layers of governance into what I think is an overgoverned space already.
I guess for me it's becoming a bit of a chicken and egg argument, because we're making assumptions. When I talked before about local boards, local empowerment, and we need to get the language right. It's not community boards with delegations. This is about the local board, which has statutory powers and funding to match the local board model, such as in Auckland. When I was talking about that, I was basing it on the assumption that there would be a much larger authority, not a kapiti Horowhenua model at all, but a much larger model. So that my concern is that if we go forward with a front foot or whatever, deep concern is it's not going to be a go at all, because it simply doesn't match what I think of the 5 criteria the government has set. The new planning system is number 1, and despite the fact that they haven't, to my knowledge, prioritised those 5 at all, formally, I don't think they've actually said here's the ranking of those criteria. I think what's come through in Minister Bishop's interview, which Mike shared with us, he made it very clear, as this Monique reference, that it's actually very much front of mind with them as the new planning system. So they want something that looks big, and if we are going to end up with whatever happens, something that is big, then the local board scenario, which is actually a Horowhenua model or an urban-rural model or something like that, a big local board, big compared with what things are now, makes sense. But certainly if we end up with promoting the kapiti Horowhenua model, then you're right, Bernie, we're back into the sandpit again. So it's about understanding what model we're pursuing. And I know this is a step process, but we have to talk all over the place, and I cannot see, if we're seriously to engage with this process, that we can do other than say we understand your priorities as a government, we understand that front of mind is a new planning regime, that it needs to work with the natural boundaries in our districts and so on as much as possible. Then we work with that model and we talk about how we therefore want to make sure, beyond those big strategic cross-boundary issues, what is it that matters to us, and what is local empowerment, not local voice, but local empowerment, what does that then look like?
just before you have your say, I could flick to the next slide, because we're not trying to get you to agree things. We're just trying to, I guess, throw out the spectrum of what you could have. So you have considered the community council model in the Wellington perspective, yeah, but that you could say, actually, we like that idea, we just don't like that group of councils with it. We want to take that and talk about that in the Palmerston North Horowhenua Kapiti sense. So there is a kind of, this is a spectrum. This is not a, it's not sort of one or the other. Yeah, it is a spectrum of things that you could have some local layers which are like your community boards now, which just get to do what you tell them and what you give them, and the next council election you might change that, through the ones that are set by statute, which is the local boards. They are given specific responsibilities that only the government can change. You go right across to this point where you've got a community council that actually it's governance and service delivery, and sitting over the top of it is the unitary council that also does governance and service delivery. So it's not we're probably presented as a kind of a binary thing. It's not, and that's why Monique was dragging you back to the principle stuff as well.
Listening to David and Bernie, I was wondering whether pragmatically, if you took that slide that had the five different representation things, and then if you had in your mind another column which says what this looks like in practice, and I think what you're both saying is almost putting some figures or some characteristics around it. So, like thinking about our current model, Horizons at the moment, we've got one councillor that represents 20,000 people at that strategic regional level. At the district council level, it's about one councillor for every 3,500 people. At the community board level, it's one for every 1,000 people. And so if we start to look at kind of population per representative as a band or something, maybe that's helpful, but also the characteristics of, at a local level, like kind of that form of representation works best when these characteristics exist or don't exist. Is that kind of what you're like? Because that's what I'm sort of thinking, is that if we said at the strategic level, we think that 20,000 people per representative is kind of about the sweet spot. At that district level, it's about, maybe it's 3,000 to 5,000. I don't know, but like maybe if we sort of articulated it kind of, I don't know if that's workable with this kind of framework or whether that's getting too far, but kind of giving an example of where we see a sweet spot might help kind of put some flesh on some of these principles. Just make a reflection that I think every council table I've been at in the last 12 weeks, of all those council tables, Mayor Bernie is the first to say that his community is overrepresented. Everybody looks at the place they are now and says that that's the right thing. Any change to that is worse. And some of the councils, like Jesse said, represent 800 people per councillor. Some of them already represent tens of thousands. And each perspective says we are at the right place now. The next change is wrong. So you could do it by numbers, but I'm not sure that it will ultimately get what you want to.
So, yeah, I'm of a contrary opinion. I think the more councillors, the merrier. I mean, to me, that better serves the idea of democracy in terms of representation. And actually, you know, when we talk about what costs the money, I don't think democracy is the big ticket item here, to be fair. The other query I've got here is what is federation, or the idea of that, such a terrible thing? You know, I mean, it's like I've heard, I can't remember who said it, but someone said that apparently the government's not really keen on that, because the model I've seen, which is the one Ruapehu put up, is that basically each area keeps their mayor, keeps their council, and they basically collaborate on all other things. But that seems to me the one that would mostly preserve the democratic aspect of our democracy, our local democracy, and give the savings the government's allegedly looking at, which I doubt very much is really the driver behind this. Why is not federation? What's so bad about federation?
My personal opinion, or our opinion about it, you start to run into the challenge of this, because under the federated model, you effectively keep the district councils, you change their name and you pretend it's a unitary, but you have two tiers of council. And I'm quite honest, the councils that are promoting the federated model are generally the ones wanting to protect their position as an organisation. You end up with two organisations doing things. And the moment you have that, you have issues around who's actually responsible for it, who's funding it, is it the same organisation that is collecting the money and doing it, and ultimately who is responsible for the decision at the end of the day around what's collected and what's spent and what the service is. And if you have two organisations involved in that, that's when you have problems. And that until the federated model comes out of Greater Manchester, and in the Greater Manchester model, it is just the strategic stuff that's done up there. So if we are just talking about putting together some strategies across the region, and if everything is effectively done at the district council level, then where are the efficiencies? Where are the benefits for anyone?
Some of the aspects of model that people like, which is kind of what I've heard, is it's about protecting local representation, local voice. Like, my advice is that you can achieve that through a community council that sits within a broader unitary authority where the right things are being done at that unitary level, but the things that mean the most to communities, the things they touch, feel and see every day, is what happens within the community council, but without the risk of creating the lack of accountability triangle. And I think the opportunity for council is, if we're not ready for a head start, how do you do enough to demonstrate to the government you've done enough thinking that you're ready to lead the conversation with whoever to do the design piece? And it probably means not using the word federation, because we know that what I've heard from ministers don't align with the word federation, but they've definitely not come out opposed to that idea of community councils, local representation, local decision making, a powered up local board. With statutory decision making powers.
Yeah, I guess for me it's not how it's wrapped up, it's the things that I think about when I talk to people that we represent. They just want to be assured of service delivery. They want to know that they can turn their taps on, they can flush their toilet, and that their library will be there if they want it, all those sorts of things. And they want a feel of local. And I know it's been 38 years since TLAs have been in force, and you still have people in Foxton who talk about the borough council. So change comes slowly, but it's thinking about those people we represent and all of those 5 principles there, and what the underlying concept of those principles represent. I think what we've voiced around the table, but I guess it's understanding that we're thinking about those bigger picture things from the government planning and infrastructure delivery, making sure that happens, whether it's unitary or whether it's district-wide. And it looks like if it's unitary, then over time there will be some economies and probably some better work around innovation and all of that sort of stuff. For the people we represent, it's not what will they lose, because what I hear from people is they want leadership that they can rely on. They want leadership that's about fairness. They want leadership that they can have faith in, and however that's made up of, that's what representation means to them, is that they can choose the people who sit around decision-making tables. So in whatever form that takes, I don't think it really matters. What's the matter, Sam?
I made a flippant comment saying they can know they're going to play about.
Well, they don't, and that's it. They want, I guess, faithful leadership. And I've seen that over my time in council. They want leadership that preserves their identity and preserves their sense of faith in the place that they reside. And so I think, for me, that's what I'm focusing on, is what will give the people of this district that we represent, and whether it becomes a wider district, that sense of representation. And however we package that up, it's about how the people who get in there deliver it.
So I wonder if I might offer a kind of a way forward that gets us a bit further towards where we need. Perhaps backs up what you said, Sam, is that if you do choose to put in whatever it is that's short of a proposal, then actually what you're saying to the government is these are the principles we're going to do representation on the basis of, and we are working with our partners to define what that means in practice, and that's the next step, because you don't know who they are yet, and that's the next bit, but at least you're saying you've got this far, because actually in the time we've got available, I think the best thing you could do and the best support you could provide to your officers is perhaps to start to give them some direction that, okay, there were 6 Head Start options considered. There are 2 front foot options or back foot defence. One of them might be. Are there some of these that actually, as a council table, you're not going to really support, so that your officers can focus their time and attention in the next week, and your mayor in perhaps beginning discussions in one direction or another?
How do I put this? I won't be delicate. Option 1 and 3 really aren't options, are they? Because I think we've had a really clear signal from Kapiti that they are not interested. And I am really loath to waste time on having been through the waters context and keeping Kapiti in the picture. It is clear to me from public statements and the sentiment in the media from Kapiti that they want to go it alone. And so they need to face the consequences of that, which is that because they are not willing to give a signal about their interest in northern neighbours, that they face the very real prospect of getting sucked into Wellington. And I think that that's their reality. And so I don't feel like we need to keep the door open to Kapiti. And I don't say that lightly, because there is some real merits in progressing. But I think unless there is a signal in the next couple of days from Kapiti that there is actually genuine interest in keeping this alive, why would we bother? Why would we waste our time and energy at this point on something that they've said no to? Because it's a little bit like Manawatu as well. There's a lot of merit and sense in looking at a Horowhenua Manawatu kind of model. But if your partner is not willing to say, or your potential partner, or and we've always talked about it in the context of Tinder, if the potential date is not interested, why would you waste your time, money, and energy? So basically, the only thing that's really realistically on the table, from my perspective, is option 6. And I'm not saying I'm necessarily for that, but I just think it's the only option. And I know we have to have multiple options on the table, but realistically, it's kind of like option 5 and keeping the door open to that, and option 6. But the other ones are kind of dead as far as I'm concerned.
Sorry. And just observing that Mayor Burney is obviously attending the Kapiti Coast District Council workshop this afternoon, and that is on the basis that Kapiti's clear that their preference is a single unitary authority, but they also passed a resolution that they continue to work
with their neighbour to the north, and maybe not quite how you just articulated it, but in a different way, that message yesterday has been articulated to Kapiti, and that is part of me, Bernie, going to the workshop today, because as officers we observe that as elected members you need to know where Kapiti stands, so that you can make an informed decision about what might form a Head Start, front foot or backstop option.
Thank you, Annie. What you've highlighted there was, if we were straw voting, I would have discounted 2, 4 and 5. I can live with leaving options 1 and 3 in, for the point of view of trying to make slightly bigger organisation for the benefits in the long term, but I have to say there is some trade-offs there, but I think they're negotiable for the local voice if we sell ourselves right to go with option 6. But I think maybe we should keep 1 and 3 in for the time being.
Yeah, to consider option 6, option 3 and option 1 for all sorts of reasons, but because also the councils that sit around the boundaries, particularly Manawatu and I think maybe Tararua, they're councils that I could see that we could work with constructively, but from a pragmatic perspective, option 6, we know there is open conversations. Option 3 would be my preferred, based on the information I've read today, and it will depend on the council report. And I'd love to see Kapiti consider us a good deal.
I probably agree with Councillor Jennings, but I probably can't articulate it the same. I think for me personally, option 3 and 6, giving them a little bit of an olive branch to the south, I think, and ultimately agree with Councillor Mason. It would be beneficial, and obviously the information we've been presented to date does illustrate that, especially with size, even when you probably go down to some of the financials. But yeah, definitely open to option 6 as well. So I personally could cut 2 or 3, 4 maybe out of that list.
Yes, look, I'm for option 3, and I have a little more hope in my heart maybe than Sam, in terms of I hope that there will be some pragmatism to Kapiti's decision making. So I think we do need to keep that alive, but also strategically it just makes sense. Pulling some words out of the Morrison Low report. It's about our natural neighbours to the north, and it's about the gateway that links us to the south. It really shows a natural connection. It's something I don't think we should give up on, because it sort of makes sense both in terms of the north and the south, and how that would come together. Option 6, reluctantly, but it just feels very inadequate to me. HDC and Palmerston North City Council, it doesn't make sense, particularly in terms of the new planning regime and so on, the catchment system and so on. It's about, well, we've got to do something, so they're willing and we're willing, so let's get married. It just is a very, very shallow. Also, Sam planted the seed and I'm growing it. So yeah, so I'm reluctantly that, but definitely option 3. I think we cannot give up on that. Yeah.
Horizons Region MOU to me looks interesting, and I may change my mind, but as for the rest of it, nah.
This just feels like a Game of Thrones to me. I'm thinking really option 3 and option 6 are only really options for us for the size and scale. I still just show me the money and show me the savings is what I'm interested in. If we don't have scale, we won't get there, I don't think. And I kind of of the opinion that we'll do all this work and lay all the foundations, and those that don't come along will get shoehorned in behind us anyway. And That doesn't sit well with me either. It's a bit like the whole water entity is you do all the hard work and then other people get pushed into it. So that's what's frustrating me at the moment. Is we're trying to lead here and others don't want to get on board, and then we're going to put all our time, energy and heartache into this, and then they're going to be pushed into there anyway. I mean, I can see that it'll end up, Kapiti will get dragged one way or the other. It just depends what that looks like for them. But I can see one or two Palmerston with Horowhenua and Tararua all in the same. I just don't think the government will want to see any smaller than that. That's my view.
I think Councillor Jennings made some great points tonight. I'm obviously of the opinion that option 3 is still an option. Obviously, it's preferred, but Councillor Jennings is making some very valid points, and as I say, just kind of go with what your meeting would kind of tell us. Really, I'm an optimist, so I'm always going to, fight for it. But Councillor Jennings, she makes some great points.
Can I just also put another thing across the table here? When you're talking about option 6, I guess the pictorial ones, they were Head Start options. They were if you were going to put a proposal in. On the right, is it on the right? Yep. There is a sort of a lesser than that, the front foot. It's effectively option 6, but you're not ready to put a proposal in. So in the interest of your office's time over the next 10 days, are you indicating actually write the proposal so that we can have it on our council table, we can accept it and we send it to the government, or we see option 6 as the option that potentially is emerging, but we understand we're not ready to put the proposal in, it's something short of that, because they're actually quite different things for the next 10 days.
But yeah, I'd write the proposal and just get on with it.
Of the opposite, for the simple reason, that's where we sit side by side, is because we've heard earlier this morning that there is not going to be a financial benefit. We're still going to have to do the long-term plan and everything like that. We've got an election coming up. I think we go front foot with no predetermination.
Yeah, this conversation's a bit hard without getting close to predetermination, but I can signal that, my sweet spot right now would be simply something that kind of reports back the thinking we've done, what we've looked at, but says still too much uncertainty on a number of things. What does the RMA reforms actually look like? We are still talking to our neighbours. We need more detail on what the backstop process looks like, because I think there are still conversations that have to happen, and I feel like the front foot kind of even that potentially closes us off to other things without having the full picture of what the lay of the land looks like. So it's kind of a lesser option than front foot, but it's something more than doing nothing.
So just for context, if a proposal is to be written to be on your council table for adoption, you're looking at a 40, 50-page document that goes through all the government's criteria. A lot of it's already in here, but there is a reasonable amount of work to turn that into a report that is then a proposal to be adopted. So, not saying can't, but just so in your mind, they're very different things.
There's way too many imponderables here to go to that, from my point of view. And I'm just, I feel like we're being pushed into a corner over this, and we have to be fair from day dot. And no, and why are we doing it? It's all being done out of fear. Fear we might get something we don't want. So, making decisions out of fear is never a good idea in my view. But it's just, there's a word for it, but I won't use it in polite company.
So what I haven't heard today is this direction that we should start working on the assumption we should build a Head Start proposal, and that's not to preempt a decision that council will obviously need to make next Wednesday, because you know that in the multiple reports that we've provided you, which will be attached to the agenda, there will be there's multiple options for council to debate. What we're just trying to get a steer on is so that we can package a council report up that assists in decision making. But off the back of today's conversation, what you can expect is some framing around Head Start, some framing around something in the middle, and some framing around backstop, and then a focus on those options which we've heard from the table have a stronger alignment with the priorities and principles that you set at the start of this process. We won't discount and exclude those other options like the Wellington option, the MOU option. We'll still talk about it in the report, but it will be far more kind of light touch referencing rather than the deep analysis. And then we'll have a focus around representation, so that whatever option you choose, Head Start, front foot, backstop, and then whatever iteration within that around who your potential dance partners might be, you've also endorsed the representation principles that would guide any conversation we then have with Wellington. Probably just the comment I'd make on option 6 is that option 6 there, as Dan highlighted, is for a Head Start. The PNCC and HDC front foot option, as articulated by Bernie in his email to elected members, offers the opportunity of flexibility to still have some of those conversations with neighbours. The difference is it provides HDC an opportunity to put a line in the sand to say, actually, we're ruling out option 5. Because the data and analysis tells us it doesn't work for these reasons, and so we would have a tighter frame around what flexibility we offer to the front foot.
The report's going Thursday, did you say? Okay. Look, my intention today is to impress upon Kapiti that, we would like to know as soon as possible whether they are going to be part of a Head Start proposal or not first, or if they're leaning towards that. Because if they say they want to be part of a backstop, then that, to me, signals that they're not ready for any partnership in terms of that. So that may think, but, I agree with Sam. They messed us around a little bit with water. After we put our heads up and pretty much got locked off because they said no. So I'm, I am wary of signalling to them that we are keen to join them if they're not going to reciprocate. And while I've always said my preference has been for option 3 right through, without their endorsement of that option, then I'm reluctant to go any further with it. I am leaning towards that option on the front foot part. I think it's important that we still give options to some of those other councils in the Horizons region an opportunity to join us if they see fit. And as Morgan said, I think they may well be directed in future. But I think Horowhenua needs to stand up. I think we need to put our heads up and say that we are, one of our priorities is being fit for reform. We need to, I think, show our community we're ready for it and move appropriately.
I think the table, just from listening to the table today, there's still some variation in kind of where people sit on the continuum. But if we take nothing away from today other than actually rolling out some stuff, and I'd be really keen to just say, I'll put my cards on the table, is the Wellington option is just dead
dead to me. Like, just take it off the table. Don't even bother wasting any more time on it. That's particularly because, like the signals from Kapiti, then you've got this non-contiguous district anyway. So, like, just Wellington out. And actually thinking about option 5, that mix with all of those 7 councils is just not a goer either, because I think we've already heard signals from Wanganui, maybe Rupehu, and Manawatu. So, like, option 5 is kind of dead too. So, clearly dead option 2, clearly dead option 5. There might be like a subgrouping of option 5 that may be still viable in the future. But then I've already signalled I kind of think that option 1 and option 3 are dead as well. But I'm getting the sense that I'm in a minority view on that. But yeah, my cards on the table: option 2, option 5, completely dead. Don't waste your time.
Yeah, 100%. I was in Wellington last night, and it sort of brought back bad memories, and probably.
Does anyone disagree with option 2 and option 5 being like just kind of taken off the table? Don't waste your time covering them in the report, other than mentioning that we've looked at them.
We'll definitely mention them and provide some commentary, because of course we're wanting to ensure that we uphold our responsibilities under the Local Government Act. Councillor Jennings about all other options, but they won't get the same analysis in the options. And am I also hearing that council wanting to see a little bit more flexibility around that front foot option, which might have a bit of a think about others, but also pulling out some of the, I don't want to put words in your mouth, Councillor Barker, but pulling out some of the kind of principles and good bits of that federation model around community like that community council type, powered up local board, powered up community board option.
Monique, the New Plymouth District Council called it, and I think I sent it to you already, they called it Pathfinder. Was that they're basically saying we're still looking at different pathways, like we're open to amalgamation, Pathfinder, and I kind of viewed that as lesser than front foot, because it says that there's still stuff alive, there's still some conversation to have. We're generally open, but it's got to be right for these reasons and these principles.
Yeah, and Thames Coromandel have called it pace setter. Look, we've been using language with you for a while about getting a head start on the backstop, but not being in the head start. The front foot terminology, which Alison cautioned me, was she was like, "Oh, Monique, come up with something better than that." That was just a very, like, you can call it what you want. It's an analogy, a metaphor.
And interesting, the conversation that the Mayor's had with DIA last week, where those were mentioned, weren't, I would say, received well by DIA. They either expect a pretty reasonable sort of approach or none at all, basically. I don't think they're, the inference that I took was that just sending a letter is a bit of a waste of time. Even a really, really light touch wouldn't really be seen as very well at all either. So it's interesting the different sort of nuances that they're putting on some of that stuff, and it'll be. I look forward to the report. Good luck writing it.
What was that?
Okay, very conscious that we are 11 minutes over time and some of you may have to leave. So thank you for your time today. Thank you for the direction. We will continue to get underway writing the report, and that will come through to you on Thursday. And would we like to close with our karakia?
Kia whakairia tapu, kia wātia aitiara,